So, welcome to our discussion of the 12th passage. And why just the discussion? We actually get to sit down together and work on these areas with each other. So, as usual, we will go ahead and go through a passage where the first pass is where you read the passage by pausing the video and then answer the questions by pausing the video. And once you are done with all of these things, you and I will sit down together, go ahead, discuss the passage threadbare, and then move over to the questions and discuss them equally together. So let's go ahead and dive into a passage starting with this. So why don't you go ahead and pause the video right here, read, and then I will take you to the next slide. So let's start. Next. Next. So please pause, read. Next. Next. Okay, so now that you've read the passage, let me take you over to the questions, starting with this one right here. So pause the video, answer the question, and then I'll take you to the next one. Next. So please pause and answer. Question 3, pause and answer. And the fourth and the last question now, please pause and answer this one. All right, so now that's done, let's go ahead and start reading this together. We'd start here and then take it up. So deep in the south of Egypt, on the west bank of the Nile, facing the historical capital Thebes, stand two 60-foot tall statues of the pharaoh Amenhotep III from 14th century before the Common Era, or as we used to call it when I was growing up, before Christ. So by the time the Romans annexed Egypt in 30 BC, so prior to that, Egypt must have been either a part of some other kingdom or an independent country. But then in around 30 BC, Romans annexed it. Romans took it under their control. So by the time the Romans annexed Egypt in 30 BC, these colossi were an ancient remnant of the grandeur of the pharaoh's mortuary temple. Okay, let's take a pause. So by the time the Romans annexed Egypt in 30 BC, these colossi, what exactly is a colossi? What would that be? So the colossi basically is the larger than life statues which were made by Greeks or Romans. So colossi is nothing but a statue which is larger than life. It is a plural noun. The singular is colossus. Then I see another word. So these colossi were an ancient remnant. Remnant is the leftover of the grandeur of the pharaoh's mortuary temple. Okay, so a mortuary temple was a temple built in ancient Egypt to honor a deceased pharaoh and commemorate their reign. So let's start from here. So there was a mortuary temple built for the pharaoh, obviously. Grandeur is that it must have been magnificent, fabulous, amazing. So these statues that you see today are just the remnants of the grandeur of that temple. The temple was doomed by the Nile's floodwaters that they had once fronted. So the temple must have been located on the banks of the Nile, but when the flood comes, it obviously does not really stop. It does not see a temple and stop. It just went in, and that led to the destruction or a large-scale destroying of the temple. So it was not just the visual impact of the lonely, poignant pair. So this poignant pair is those two colossi, larger than life statues. Poignant essentially means tragic. So here in this case, tragic, gloomy, sad looking. So you look at them and it makes you tear up. Okay, so it is not just the visual impact of those statues that captivated visitors, but also the extraordinary whistling sounds that emanated from the northern statue at dawn, likely the result of earthquake damage in 26 BC. So two qualities. grandeur, the largeness, plus that extraordinary whistling sound that came from one of those two statues. Let's move over to the next one. But Greek and Roman tourists tended to reinterpret the colossi through the lens of their own culture. So when you reinterpret something through your own culture, you basically kind of, use the perspective, the point of view of your culture whenever you look at anything. For example, right now we were calling it mortuary temple. But then when I read the word temple, a particular image comes to my mind. And that image is borrowed from my culture. Chances are that something similar is happening with you as well, right? So same thing happened with Greeks and Romans too. So they looked at those statues and they reinterpreted them using their own culture, the POV of their own culture. So they overlooked its pharaonic roots. So in reality, it was part of what? A mortuary temple built for a pharaoh. A pharaoh is basically an Egyptian king. So they ignored the fact that it was built by and for Egyptians and instead saw Memnon, the mythical king of Ethiopia. So Memnon is one of those characters in Greek mythology, right? In fact, you've probably heard of this country called Troy, thanks to Trojan horse, or maybe you watched this movie called Troy. It was also dubbed and released in Hindi, and in between there was a phase some 15 odd years ago when they dubbed a movie in Hindi, they also changed the title. So Troy in Hindi was called Mohabbat Ki Jang, and it also featured Brad Pitt. So Troy, the last king of Troy was Priam, and he fought a battle with the Greeks. So when Priam's elder son Hector died, Memnon, who was related to Priam, came and joined him and fought in that particular battle. In fact, he was also considered very powerful. Memnon was killed by Achilles, from that Achilles heel idiom, if you remember. So instead of looking at it from that Egyptian history angle, they inserted their own history in it. They looked at those statues and saw Memnon, the mythical king of Ethiopia, serenaded by his anguished mother Eos, the goddess of dawn. It became a spectacle to behold and commemorate. What exactly is a spectacle? A spectacle is something that is worthy of being watched, okay? And then commemorate, when you remember something officially and give respect to it, then it is called that, it's known as the act of commemoration. So it became a spectacle to behold is watch, and commemorate. So some 107 inscriptions have been catalogued at the basis of the statues. Greek, Latin, bilingual. They were not merely scratched onto the rock, but engraved by professional stone cutters. The majority states some variation of "I have heard Memnon." Okay, then next. Visitors were a diverse set, hailing from throughout the Roman Empire. So people who visited those statues came from a lot of different places within the Roman Empire. So Anatolian, Levantine, Corinthian, Greeks, provincial administrators coming upstream from Alexandria, Gallic soldier. So all these, so people from faraway Rome itself. So people from basically a lot of different places. Journeying to the southern extremity of the empire for many of these visitors was no small feat. An ancient traveler to Egypt or elsewhere had to consider the sheer investment of time, resources, and effort. Yet, throughout history, distant horizons and thirst for knowledge of the faraway have had relentless allure. Allure is attraction. So, what we are basically told is that back in the day, traveling required a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of effort. Yet, that charm of the faraway places, that thirst for the knowledge, led people to travel. Indeed, the notion that the Roman Empire consisted of isolated, immobile communities has been upended by modern scholarship. So, modern scholarship has proved this notion incorrect. Recent examination of the empire's vast territory, diverse peoples, and long history reveals that travel offered adventure, novelty, and opportunity for those with the resources or fortitude. Fortitude is essentially mental toughness, making for a cosmopolitan ancient world. Okay, so that gives us a peek into those ancient travelers. Then Rome evolved from a small Latin settlement on the banks of the river Tiber in central Italy into a superpower which at its most expansive in the 2nd century CE. CE is Common Era. Remember BCE, CE. So BCE is before Common Era, which was called before Christ earlier, and CE is the Common Era, which was called AD. After Christ period essentially. So from enveloped the entirety of the Mediterranean, that entire Spain, Portugal, Turkey part, and stretched from northern England to the Middle East and very briefly the Persian Gulf. Ooh. Without modern mechanized transportation, mechanized is always cars, buses, etc. that we have, and confronted by enormous distances and varying weather by season, the ancient perception of distance had to have differed from our own. But of course, it is true even today. See, I live in Delhi, where if you ask me to travel to a place which takes an hour, I'm fine with it. If you ask me to go someplace that is going to take, say, 45 minutes, I'd be okay. But I actually come from a very small town, and back in the day when I used to live in that small town, if somebody asked me to travel for 45 minutes, I'd be like, oh, so far, why do you want me to travel so much? But then, so similarly for them, the idea behind the distance must have been not similar to ours. So a long distance journey in the Roman Empire, it has been posited, proposed, suggested, was anywhere beyond 5 days reach. So any place that took you more than 5 bloody days to reach was the one that they called a long distance journey. Quite the departure from our current ideal of anywhere not accessible within a few hours by car, plane, or train. Oh, okay. Then the last paragraph, those journeys were enabled by the unprecedented political reality of the empire, which emerged after the fall of the already expanding republic in 27 BC under the first emperor Augustus. Augustus' imperial autocracy put an end to the repeated civil wars and disastrous political instability of the late republic. The 2-century-long Pax Romana, Roman peace, and the stabilizing influence of one-state rule imparted a newfound sense of security. So that's our passage. Let's dive into the questions, starting with the first one. The first one is asking us about the main idea. Now, before I head over to the main idea question, I'd like to ask, what exactly is the subject matter of this passage? It started off by introducing those two colossi to us and then ventured into the idea of travel in the ancient times and the fact that a lot of people visited those statues, that mortuary temple, as gone by the inscription, tells us a little more about this notion of the traveling of those ancient individuals, right? So basically, travel in the ancient Roman times. And the passage is an informative passage. It is not something that you and I will call a passage which is persuasive. Exactly, the author does not really go on to share his or her own opinion with us. So let's start. So A, Roman Empire was the most powerful empire of ancient times that made the travelers feel secure and travel farther than they had earlier. Okay, the most powerful empire, is not mentioned anywhere in the passage. This is alien, this is irrelevant, this is out of scope. So that's the problem with A. Let's look at B. The Roman Empire enabled an early version of global tourism that offered travelers adventure, novelty, and opportunity. Yeah, these things are mentioned. The only problem that I have is that we are talking about tourism within the Roman Empire. So global is a little broad, but the rest of it is okay. C, the Roman Empire made travel all over the world possible. Exact same problem. And it led to a surge in tourism with favorable outcomes. These things are not mentioned here. Surge, maybe we can still infer it, but favorable outcomes, no. So if I compare B with C, B is definitely better. So let's rule out C. How about D? Traveling was a difficult endeavor in ancient times, but the Roman Empire made it easier with its security and stability. Okay. Now when you say traveling, it was not traveling which was difficult. It was long distance traveling that was difficult. Moreover, traveling was a second order result, right? Where the stability and the security that the Roman Empire provided led to people traveling more. It was not their goal. When you look at D, it somehow appears that promoting traveling was the goal of the Roman Empire. So there are these two problems with D. Therefore, I'd say on the whole, B is going to be better than D, and thus we can eliminate D and opt for B as our answer. Let's dive into the next question straight away. Question number 2. Which of the following cannot be inferred from the information provided in the passage? So, a reasoning based question where, when it is inference, we go ahead and label every option as true, false, can't say on the basis of the information supplied by the passage. So let's dive straight into that. A. The 2-century-long Roman peace helped expand the scope of traveling in the Roman Empire. True. This is something that we can infer from the last paragraph. B. The ancients perceived distance differently than we do. So remember that passage where I took that example of I live in Delhi and then I come from a small town. So that part where they talked about without modern mechanized transportation, confronted by enormous distances, varying weather, they must have had a differing opinion. So this is something that we can infer from there. So true. Culture has an impact on the way we interpret historical objects. Second paragraph, where the tourists, the visitors overlooked the pharaonic origins and reinterpreted those from the perspective of their culture. So definitely true. D. The Roman Empire consisted of cloistered and static communities. Cloistered is isolated, separate. But then the passage very clearly tells us that this is a notion that has been upended by modern scholars. It has been proven wrong by modern scholars. So to claim D will actually be false on the basis of the passage. So we are looking for which of the following cannot be inferred. So as you can see, A, B, and C can all be inferred. They are true. D is false. So in this particular case, B has to be our answer. So let's dive into the next one now. There you go. Based on the passage, it can be inferred that the visitor's attitude when they wrote, I have heard Memnon was most likely to be. So those visitors took the pains to travel. And whatever was written there was written out of a positive feeling or a negative feeling. Has to be positive, right? In fact, the passage uses words like spectacle, and they felt happy and joyful in that context, right? Because of that. And therefore, considering that we're looking for a positive word, the only positive word that I have here is A. Now, when you look at tendentious is negative. Tendentious is an adjective that means that you're promoting a specific and controversial point of view. So when something is tendentious, it shows a bias towards a particular point of view, particularly a point of view which is controversial. So negative, you can rule it out. Nonchalant attitude, nonchalance is an air of easy indifference. If you're nonchalant, you are not bothered by the situation, even when we can probably say you should. So passage is of course not at all moving towards nonchalant. Visitors in fact took it all seriously. So it's not flippant or non-serious or nonchalant. Disbelief, no, we have nothing in the passage that suggests disbelief. So A is going to be our best option. And here is the fourth and the last question, which asks us for all of the following are true except. So let's go ahead and read. The journey across the Roman Empire was impacted by the political situation of the time. True. Last paragraph. B. A number of visitors engraved some variation of I have heard Memnon under the statue of the pharaoh. Can't say. Now you may look at it and say, Vikrant, why can't say? Isn't it true? It is written there. But then let me quickly take you back to that relevant part and then we will come back to it. Okay. So here you go. So look at this last sentence. They were not merely scratched onto the rock, but engraved by professional stone cutters. So people did not write those by themselves. It's not the visitors who engraved. It was professional stone cutters who engraved it. Now they may have asked the stone cutter to engrave it on their behalf. That's okay, but then we cannot say that a number of them engraved it themselves, which is what this sentence would mean. Therefore, can't say. Okay, let's look at C. Greek and Roman visitors tended to reinterpret the Colossi through the lens of their own culture. True. Second paragraph. A number of visitors to the statue of the pharaoh Amenhotep III knew Latin or Greek. Yes, because out of a lot of inscriptions that we had, a lot of them were in Latin, quite a few of them were in Greek. Had they not known those languages, why would they ask them to write it in that particular language? Why would they ask those to be engraved in that particular language? So that's about this particular passage. I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and yes, press the bell icon. And here is a thought that I want to leave you with. If the world breaks your legs, you go and beat it with your crutch. Let's apply it to our RC. So if the accuracy rate in RC breaks your leg, go back and attack that passage and make sure that you beat it with the crutches that you have. Do not give up. Keep on fighting, and that's what matters. So that's where I would stop today, and I will see you in the next one now. Until then, keep studying hard and do let me know how it's going for you. Drop a comment down below.